Oh, fuck.
I actually do that. And in my Perl, you can add those you want. So what I do is when I run it through, I actually come out with how many characters are not in your case. So that comes out as a limited field. Yeah. And then I get to make pattern matches on it. So I can actually say, 3 uppercase, 2 lowercase. You can give me all the And so I actually wrote it so that you can add that. But that's really what I wanted. That's what I thought. Yes, that's what I expected to be doing. We've been dividing it up. When I get to see it, I will translate that.
This next talk is Baked, Not Fired. It's an unauthorized phishing exercise by Syn Phishus.
So, Syn Phishus, you probably get Sid Vicious based on the album cover. Sid is kind of a hero to me, and I try to model my life after Sid's. So we begin with the manifesto, the bollocks. For those of you who don't know, bollocks is a British term, slang for testicles, so this is kind of like the balls. And this is straight out of Sid's mouth, except I actually put bullet points there. But then I thought, well, Sid wouldn't use normal bullets if he was given a PowerPoint. So I made up some bullets there. But you get the basic idea. Most importantly, don't let them take you alive. That's critical there. But then, maybe not. It turns out that Sid was taken alive. He might not have brain cells left at the moment in time, but he was taken alive. So you have to step back and say, well, maybe being a complete and total kill everything radical isn't the way to go. But, sometimes something happens and you feel like you got to do something. Why is it? What happens? In my case, I sort of broke down kind of like HAL 9000 did. I tried to do the right thing, but management wasn't sort of doing the right thing, and things got sort of lost and my circuitry got crossed. And for want of a better description, I developed neurotic symptoms. So let's talk about the conflict first. I worked for a company that had a small security group in part of a large, several tens of thousands of employees company. The company overall had a very good security policy, but it didn't enforce it and had really rather poor security awareness and practices around the whole security policy. And of course, HR loses a CD with all social security numbers of all employees, all dependents, and anybody who was ever in the retirement program. Now, again, the policy said this was supposed to be encrypted. And there was actually a training, security awareness campaign that said, hey, make sure you always encrypt this stuff, but HR didn't care. We had also, for years, been requesting that when any kind of formal announcement was coming from the administration, that they would digitally sign them. We had a key system, private PKI, but 99% of everybody's email clients would have registered correctly that the thing was signed. It was trivial to implement this last part, but they didn't want it. So they never fixed the HR problem as far as going through and doing a bigger assessment to find out if there was any other issues. Of course, they fixed the one problem with the one CD transfer, and they didn't do anything about preventing us from being exploited by phishing attacks overall. So, what goes through my mind? Well, normal communication, trying to work through the channels, isn't effective, so I've got to try harder to make the point. And that's how I came about by doing a neurosis, doing an unauthorized phishing awareness campaign to show them how potentially damaging phishing could be within the organization. So I created an email. The idea was to create an email to announce the identity theft insurance vendor that they, of course, promised they were going to sign us all up for. They said it would be 6 to 8 weeks before they tell us, and so that gave me a little bit of time there to get this all worked out. And then I create a phishing website, and people come and they give me the information. And then I thought, well, while I'm going ahead and collecting information, I'll go ahead and get their intranet logons too, because that shows not only that the people giving up their own information, but that should be a little bit more important for the corporate minds, thinking, oh, now they're risking our information. They may not care about all the individuals' information, but they should certainly care about their corporate secrets. So in doing this, I set out some goals for myself to make it look like this was really a positive thing that I was doing. Raise security awareness, yeah, that's a good thing. Demonstrate the policy is no good without testing, because heck, we had the policy, they never checked. I thought, hey, we could use this as a marketing tool. We could create this branded security awareness process, and we could either give it or sell it to our customers, and our customers would use it to do their own phishing awareness campaigns within their own organizations, and it would have our brand on it. That would be good advertising. This company made security products as well as offered security services, and nobody really thought of them as a security company. So that'd be like a cool brand thing. And so those are my main goals, is that we'd end up with something like that. It didn't work out that way, but that wasn't my fault. From a principal's perspective, I thought it was important that only I take on risk in this situation. And it was my harebrained idea. I really didn't want someone else to go down with me, so I had to get it all worked out myself, so I really didn't need help from anybody else. I wanted to make it easy as possible for some of my friends that were in the corporate IT security group to figure out what was going on when this actually happened, because, their lives, they're always really busy. They've got too much work. They've laid off too many staff in that group. And really, I didn't want them to stress out and have to spend a lot of time to figure this out. So I tried to document as much as possible, and also give them the ability to shut it down without getting in touch with me, just to make their lives easier. I thought that would be a good thing to do. I knew I might get fired, but I didn't want to get prosecuted. I wanted to set it up so that if it came down to they were going to get rid of me and take legal action, it was going to be pretty obvious that I had no malicious intent, that I wasn't trying to steal people's passwords, that I wasn't really trying to collect people's sensitive information, that, what I was trying to do was do the security awareness. And so it may not be that it would have held up in a court of law, but I was kind of hoping that I'd create enough evidence of that so that it wouldn't even get that far. The corporate lawyers would say, hey, we really don't have enough of a case. This is annoying. Get out of my face. So how did you go about doing that? Well, first part, I had to do DNS because it was going to have a phishing website that they go to. I registered the domain in my own personal name. That should be easy enough, right? Most people who are doing phishing don't register their domain names in their own name. I created then a subdomain using my company's name in that. So it was actually my company dot secure my company dot secure my info, secure my dot info. And then I used a CNAME record because I had within the corporate DNS, I was able to do it, such as use a CNAME. You could use an A record with a stable IP address. A lot of times with DHCP, you're going to keep the address for a while, so you could do that. You could probably set it all up ahead of time. In this particular case, when I had a VPN connection into the corporate network, it gave me a domain name that was always consistent, and that now I was able to use a CNAME record. And that also gave me giving the corporate IT group ability to kill the connection. All they had to do was kill my VPN connection. And then they would have been able to kill the whole session and shut down the web server. Turns out that they didn't sort of figure that part out, and it might have not been trivial for them to do that, but I didn't know that ahead of time. On the mail side, it's usually pretty easy in an internal environment to find an SMTP forwarder for you that'll dump all the mail into the central mail system. Most Exchange servers are listening on port 25. And most of the time you don't have corporate firewalls blocking. There's also a lot of other servers that are probably able to do the same thing. I decided not to do it like a telnet to port 25 and send my file up. I wanted to be consistent. I wanted to be able to do test runs, so I wrote a script. I tested it to myself more than once, made sure things were working exactly right. I used a traceable IP address to send the SMTP. So in the headers, again, it would identify me. It wasn't like I was trying to hide. And again, I used my laptop for that. And I was on the VPN, so they would be able to tie that all back to me. The email itself, I didn't even do HTML. It was all plain text. So the user would see the URL they're clicking on, and that's the URL they went to. Certainly, if you did that, then there's no trickery involved in that. They were going straight for that domain name. I'm not a corporate communications person. I realized that in advance. So I took the bunch of old corporate communications memos, especially the one that they were telling us that they lost all our social security numbers, and used that for the language of the email, just rewording a few things so it's really sounded good corporate speak. You also have to consider, if you're doing this, out-of-office bounces. In this particular case, it didn't matter because the email address I was spoofing was a corporate mailbox that is consistently being used and probably constantly being bombarded with out-of-office messages, and I don't think they're really paying attention to that. But if you were to decide to actually spoof an individual in your phishing awareness campaign, they might get bombarded with out-of-office messages, and that would sort of give them a clue, as well as possibly being a denial of service on their mailbox. So don't forget to take that into consideration. On the web server, from a forensics perspective, I wanted to be very clear that I wasn't doing anything tricky. So I did a default Apache install. I had nothing else in the Apache directory systems except the HTML files and the graphic files that were supporting what I was doing. Again, I used my corporate laptop for a server. If you do use your own system as a server and you do get in trouble, the forensics guys might have to take your copy of your hard drive. And so depending on your situation, you could lose your laptop for a few days. After this incident, having a few days of paid vacation that I didn't have to record as vacation wasn't too bad. So that didn't harm me too much. And you need to... I didn't use any scripts except what came because I borrowed the default intranet page and that had some scripts in it already. So I just went ahead and took those scripts, but I didn't add anything, didn't do anything different there. And you also need to make sure your logs are going to be clean or turn off logging. So if you were collecting a password, which I was in this particular case, make sure that doesn't show up in your log files. Otherwise, then it doesn't look like you're innocent. The web page itself, I just stole the intranet logon page. I used a post, no CGI processing, just a simple post. It turned out that when you do the post, and in the Apache logs, I wasn't logging the password that was being submitted. I set it up so that submit and cancel do the same post. So from a logs perspective, there's no way to tell if somebody clicked cancel or somebody clicked submit. There'd be no way to really tell if they fell for it or not. I thought that was important because, again, I didn't want people to get in trouble, and sometimes people go nuts and say, oh, I want to know everyone who fell for it and I'm going to punish them. That's happened in some social engineering tests, and this is sort of a social engineering exercise, and even if it wasn't authorized ahead of time, it doesn't mean management isn't going to come back and do something stupid like that. So I tried to set it up so that you wouldn't be able to figure out who had actually clicked on what link. If you did click submit or cancel, it pops up a page that says, well, this is a social engineering phishing awareness exercise. You shouldn't have clicked on this link. You need to go change your passwords, and a bunch of that kind of educational information. And so I didn't try to actually collect or ask for any personal information. I thought, well, if I got through the intranet logon, that was good enough, and that was beneficial too, because the intranet logon, they can change their password, where if I had asked for personal information, you wouldn't have been able to change that later on. In the source of this document, I put notes in for investigators, so if they happen to look at the source, They'd immediately see, oh, go look at this. It describes how this is being done. They'd know it was an exercise and not a real attack. And then, of course, you got to test it and test it and test it just to make sure that things are going to work exactly as you anticipate. That's a little hard sometimes when you're doing it all by yourself. So what kind of lessons did I learn? One, that there wasn't enough documentation. I thought I had explained things kind of clearly, but when security started investigating, they really weren't getting all the hints that I had left. So I guess I needed more documentation. Unexpected actions create unpredictable responses. I had one person on the security staff who had traced that the web server was running on my laptop. He was instant messaging me and he says, when I trace this, it says it's on your laptop. Why is that? Well, I'm hosting that web server. Oh, why? Because I sent the email. Oh, that's cool. But there really was very surprising on how many people, even once the evidence started pointing that, one, it was internal, one that was some kind of exercise and not a real attack, and then it started to look like I was the one that did it, didn't actually believe that this was happening, that I was the one that pulled this off. So also, some way or another, if you do this kind of thing, after the fact, you may want to go ahead and notify security and not just have it done through documentation within the system. That could get you shut down quicker. That's a toss-up there. I don't know. If I was doing it again, I probably still would notify them ahead of time. And make sure whatever you set up is fully patched using the latest versions and everything, because somebody started running Web Inspect on the web server as this was going on. More lessons, don't give on the principles. I had tested ahead of time, and I thought all the connections were going to come through the corporate proxy because this was a domain that wasn't internal. It turned out, and it wasn't consistent, but some IPs were getting redirects from the proxy and then connecting directly to me. So if you had reversed those IP addresses, you would have been able to figure out who had been logged into that IP address at that point in time. Now, I knew that you could do that live through DNS, or you could do it in the logs. I knew that if they were going to do it through the logs, there wasn't much I could do at that point. I didn't know that ahead of time. But during the event, a manager contacted me and said, give me your logs right now so I can start looking up and see which ones of my people fell for this, because he managed a bunch of security people. And I said, no. And he said, you need to send them to me right now. And this went back and forth for a bit. And I continued to refuse to hand it over. I said, if you need that, you go through the IT security group and have them do forensics and get that all in, you'll get that in due time. And that fortunately was enough of a hurdle that he never went through that effort. I also told him to ask his people. And most of the people, I think, that did fall for it in his group did confess that they fell for it, and unfortunately received his punishment for that. But I think his team was pretty straightforward. That wasn't an interesting thing. I sent it as sort of a test only to about 200 security people within the whole company. I didn't send it to the whole company. I set it all up to send to the whole company and then decided maybe that was a little too much. But there was a lot of people, security people, who totally fell for it. I got a lot of emails from people saying, man, that was great, I totally blew that. My favorite one was, I really liked that password too. So I think the most important thing to take out of this is I tried very hard to set this up so that I was the only one who could potentially be punished, and it nearly became the case that other people could have been punished for this. One manager said, well, if they clicked on cancel, they shouldn't have clicked on anything. They should have known that it was a bad website. They shouldn't have gone there to start with. So if they even got there, then they should be punished. And I don't understand that mentality, so I didn't anticipate that kind of thing ahead of time. But apparently that exists, and again, if they're not listening to start with, you're kind of stuck in this situation where either you do or you don't. I don't know. I think I'd still do it again, and hope that they really wouldn't have a leg to stand on when they wanted to punish people. So, in a pun on the whole thing, I really will take questions. I know I've gone pretty fast, but I didn't think there was a lot of detail. I have some questions over here. He's handing them, going around with the mic.
My question is, did you have any analysis on how many people actually fell for it out of the 200? Did you have like base numbers or anything like that?
Well, part of it is that I didn't try to tag any of the emails, so I'd have an accurate count of who read it and who fell for it. I mean, obviously, I could have used an HTML email and put a bug in there and had some better analysis, but I didn't want to know who fell for it and who didn't. The other thing is during the exercise, I was asked to pull the plug on my connection. They had to call me over voice, and they sort of still didn't figure out that I was on the VPN, and they could have done it themselves, but I did pull the plug. So it was only for about an hour and 15 minutes the site was live, and so I really don't know how many people actually read their email. I got an awful lot of hits in an hour and 15 minutes, besides the guy doing the web inspect scan. Again, I set it up so I don't know who fell for it and who didn't. Just by the number of people that told me they fell for it, I probably had at least 10% of the people actually tell me that they fell for it. So that can give you an idea of what the numbers might have been. And, oh, by the way, my downfall is that I thought I was sending it only to security people, but one of the lists was a sort of a strategic company-wide strategic security list, and there was a guy in there from the corporate communications group, and of course it was a corporate communications email address that I was spoofing to send it out, and he didn't appreciate that too much, and he had enough seniority. So I was actually on the phone with management in my chain saying, oh, this is a great idea. I want to set you up with a conference call with a customer next week to talk about selling it to them. And then he calls me back 5 minutes later and says, cancel that. So questions, where's the mic? Okay, yep.
Did you actually meet your goal? Did you actually increase awareness within your own company?
Yes. So there was some benefit to doing this. There was certainly an effort by the technical people responsible for sending out corporate emails to get them signed. There was a lot of discussion. I didn't actually stay there long enough to find out. I went into this knowing that if I got fired, it was no big deal because I was really kind of depressed about being there anyway. So, that wasn't a big risk. I was okay if I got fired. I cleared that with my wife ahead of time. I'm like, honey, I might get fired. She's like, well, if you feel it's really the right thing to do, then go ahead and do it. It's nice to have that kind of support. So, they didn't do any more phishing awareness to help out the rest of the people, and they certainly didn't start changing the procedures to test the policies that they had in place. Those things weren't corrected, but there was a little bit of movement in the right direction.
Actually, my question has to do with the policies. What policy was in place that allowed you to so easily set up a VPN connection?
Oh, I used, my regular corporate given VPN client.
Is everybody given one of those, or is it just handed out willy-nilly so everybody could set up a VPN connection?
No, I had authenticated with my secure ID token. I mean, this is a corporate VPN. I mostly did remote work, so I mostly worked from home. And but a large number of the people in the corporation had VPN connections in. And again, I was authenticated through secure ID. It was pretty obvious it was me. Yes.
I have two questions. First off, Did you ever examine the web logs to see your events per second or like your hits per second to determine a rate as to how fast individuals actually hit your site?
I tried. The problem was, and I actually talked to some people clicked on things more than once.
Of course,
And,
they
and
will.
so, and
Yeah.
I was seeing a lot of proxy servers in the IP addresses that I was getting. It wasn't consistent. I had tested it myself, and my system was using through the proxy server. So a lot of the IP addresses I've got are the proxy servers. So I see 10 within a 5-second period from the same IP address. I don't know if that's one guy clicking on stuff, or if that's a bunch of different people just happen to go through that one proxy server.
Well, regardless of that, if you could just tell like basically your threshold of how many per second, regardless of the source or anything of that nature, I think that'd be an interesting metric to look at. The other thing is that you say it's awareness, but the awareness typically comes at the end with like some type of training or things of that nature. Did that ever happen? And because this really doesn't seem that it was awareness, this more seems as though, to me, that it was an unauthorized attack by an authorized user.
Right. From an awareness perspective, if they clicked on either the cancel or the submit button, they got a page that told them about phishing, that you shouldn't go to unknown sites. So that was the goal. In an ideal setting, that would have been followed up with a corporate-wide announcement that this test had been done. Of course, they weren't going to do that because they didn't want to admit that I had done it, just like they didn't want to admit that they had lost our Social Security numbers. But they were forced to do that, fortunately, legally. So ideally, it would have done more from an awareness perspective, but this time it got cut short. So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
What department were you working for? Why wasn't it security? And why didn't you get fired?
I was a security consultant. So I knew the people in IT security. There were some mailing lists internally that we shared stuff. So as a security consultant, I knew a lot about the security of the organization. And I was given a formal written reprimand that put on my records that's sort of HR covering their butts. If I kept doing bad things, then they'd be able to fire me without any recompense. But my management chain was really supportive of me. And so they went in there defending me, saying explicitly he was not being malicious. He thought he was doing the right thing. And they did. They did know that I thought I was doing the right thing, even if they didn't agree with me either. One more question.
Did you have anybody put bogus information in there, like, yeah, nice try?
Again, I didn't collect and see the information, but some people told me that that's what they did. I don't know. Some people might have felt like they couldn't tell me that they fell for it, and once they knew that I wasn't collecting information, then it was easy enough to tell me that, oh yeah, I just put bogus stuff in there and then went to the site to see what it would do. Some of the people that I think actually did that to see what it would do, especially on the investigative team. I think they felt the responsibility to try to go and see what was going to happen next. So, well, thank you. Is there someone else coming up? There's a reason I'm presenting under a pseudonym, and I'm not going to say that. What? They don't even want to admit that this happened. So by using a pseudonym, at least I'm giving myself a little protection.